Okay. What was discussed earlier was it was very clear that the economic and political agenda always get in the way of each other. So do you think, since there was a discussion of wish list, how prudent would be a wish list for the G20 to actually come up with a model that excludes or separates the political agenda from the economic agenda? Is it possible at all to separate the two so that economic decisions can be made on what the market desires without letting the political agenda get in the way?
Yeah,
Who wants to start? Anyone? Lee,
sure,
wants to start?
sure. So I mean, you know, these are meetings of governments, of sovereign states, right? I mean, and the summits, like the one that we're about to have in Pittsburgh, involves heads of government. So you know, these are politicians, you know, and you cannot, you know, I don't think you can really separate politics from economics, even if the agenda is focused on economic policy, right? But I mean, I sense, you know, sort of behind the question, this you know, looming issue of does the agenda need to be expanded to include things like human rights or political representation? Well, you know, let's see. China, the Russian Federation, Saudi Arabia, these are all parties to the G20. How kindly would they look on a discussion session about human rights and democracy? Yeah, I think it's going to be difficult enough to forge a meaningful consensus to help restore growth and help the people of the world, especially the poor, without broadening the agenda to include these very, very important but extremely divisive issues, right? I'm not a fan of the government of Saudi Arabia. I'll just go on record as saying that. I hope that doesn't get us into trouble in the Middle East as a university. But it's my personal opinion, not Jerry Cohen's. But I certainly want Saudi Arabia to be willing to contribute to solutions. And I would be very averse to putting something on the agenda that would complicate that at this juncture.
Yes. Go ahead, Mark.
This point you make has been around for quite a long time, and it usually revolves around creating rules by which politics can stay out of market outcomes. You know, certain rules that the viability of contracts, you know, how you judge disputes through the legal system, all the things that we need to have in place to make the market system function are a set of rules and bylaws, in effect, that allow individuals to do business with each other outside of the political arena. And much of the debate over the last 200 or 300 years about how to run the world in different countries in the world is about where to put the boundaries on those rules to keep governments out of individual transactions. So your question is actually the key one, in my opinion, of how to manage the world economy. I think there are areas in which the G20 could think about where they could agree on rules to let the market system function independently of politics. I think that's a pretty good principle, and I bet you that with that in mind, if you get all these people in the room, you could probably make progress. One example would be intellectual property rights in China. You know, when I was in China, I was proud of finding, you know, a CD for $1 that had all the golden hits of the Eagles on it. And you know, and I came home and it was a little embarrassing. I was sort of proud of this, and somebody who I met was an import-export person who was really offended by that. But then it occurred to me, you know, China at some point wants to will be producing intellectual property, and they're going to want to abide by the same rules we would like them to abide by now. Knowing that that's coming, it seems to me that's an area, a small example of where we might get them to agree in principle to the rules that they would be willing to live by at some point in the future. And God knows we could probably think that through in advance, put it on the shelf and have them ready to go as soon as they get to the point where they start producing CDs that we want to buy. Now, I don't know whether that will happen, but maybe it will. So I like your question. I think that's a very, very useful principle.
Well, please join me in thanking this very distinguished panel. And thank you all for coming this evening.